But you could if you want. I
Are we all set?
think so.
All right, I'd like to call to order the agenda or the Town of McCandless Planning Commission, October 4, 2022. We have an item, the first item on the agenda, I'm told, is not going to be heard tonight.
Yeah, so I was contacted by the developer's representative yesterday afternoon, and he asked to just basically retable it since there were additional comments on Gateway's latest review that they just wanted to take the month to address, basically. So their intention is to come back at the November meeting with another revision.
Okay, well then I propose that we get a motion to table item 1, A, B, and C in the agenda. Can I have a motion?
I make the motion to table.
Motion from Al. Second. Shelley seconds. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It shall be tabled. Item number 1 has been tabled.
Okay, well, but moving on to the second item, I guess really the only meat and potatoes of our meeting tonight left. You all have in your Dropbox packets the initial, basically polished drafts of the districts and uses chapters for the new draft zoning ordinance coming out. So there's a memo that the consultants included with just, some general description, orientation for the documents. And there's also an instruction sheet. But just, for the benefit of the group, I'll outline it here. You've got 2 weeks to get comments back. I know it's a lot of text, but trust me, it can be done. I powered through it in a couple evenings. They were long evenings. But so comments can either be submitted, well, a couple ways, because we're trying to keep things unified. So, word track changes is convenient, but we don't want the consultants to miss anything, with 7 different versions of the document. So what they've asked is either use. Steve, I'm just gonna mute you, okay? So either use Adobe, PDF reader, whatever program like that you have that has the function where you can just directly add a comment to the document. There's a little graphic in the instruction sheet that shows you where that is on desktop. Or and when you do that, make sure to hit save before you send the PDF back to us. That should save your comments. If for some reason they don't translate, we'll talk through it and figure it out from there, but it's worked for me before. If you don't have the program to do that, or there are any issues, you can also, open an email, Word doc, whatever, and just write the code section number, and then your comment beside it, and we will match it to the appropriate part of the ordinance. But does anyone have any questions about that process?
I two, RJ. One is, so they're looking for individual comments. This will not be a consensus from the planning commission on comments?
That's correct. So
Okay.
we wanted to, we went through a couple different, options of like, do we want to do a Google Doc or something like that? But ultimately, because there is a risk of perception that there is a sunshine violation if we have one shared document where multiple people are adding comments, like even if you aren't all talking back and forth at each other, if there's a perception that happened, there could be an issue. So we felt it was best to provide you each with, an individual file.
So if there's a conflict, would we discuss it at a planning commission meeting?
Yeah, so what our plan is, and I mean, it'll kind of depend on what we get back from you all, because some of you, I'm sure, are gonna have more in-depth comments, and some are gonna be kind of big picture and whatnot. But so the due date is set because I have a standing staff meeting with the consultants on the Thursday of that week. So we're basically gonna, take all your comments ahead of that. That'll probably be my topic of discussion with them, how do we want to proceed? We didn't have a ton of planning commission meetings budgeted in the initial schedule, and we've had them visit a couple times. So it just kind of depends on, are the comments of a nature that I can talk with them and then sort of field them in a discussion with you all, or is it something that's even kind of above my head and we need to still have somebody come into the meeting? So, depending on what we get back, that'll inform how we're going to deal with it next month.
So my second question is, I've noticed in the review, which has been really high level so far that I did, that there are different fonts being used and all caps, and for certain words.
Hmm.
I'm assuming, because I've used this in the past myself, that whenever that happens, it's a word that's being defined in the code.
That's a good question. It wasn't something that came up in my review of it. I think you all have like a more polished version that incorporated some of my comments and everything. So I'll be honest, I have not reread the entire lengthy document. But that would be my assumption based on how I've seen other codes formatted.
It's a great tool to use in the code. So I was hoping that's what it was.
Yeah. There are certain words as well in this draft that you will see that are capitalized that in our current code are not, but those are done because, you know, there are functional legal terms for some of those, like approval, you know, that might be a capital A approval. So those are not typos. There are very specific words that were chosen to have legal meaning in that.
Okay,
A general question. I perused that, but I wanted to just ask for an example of what, could you give me an example of neighborhood density, this neighborhood density, which is one of the, there's residential, there's commercial, there's a low density, high, and then there's a neighborhood density category.
Yeah, so
Do we have I mean, can you point to an example of what that is?
sort of, yes. Kind of off the top of my head here, because it's been a couple weeks since I
Okay.
looked at the drafts myself. That's when I got my comments in. So let me think. We split the new districts into 3 main categories. You know, right now we've got about 20 districts. It's extreme. There's no need for that with the way that zoning is written now. Mixed use districts are much more sort of the way of the future for commercial areas. So the 3 groupings are, there's poor residential, which are very low density, and I'd have to look, but that might be that neighborhood. But that's supposed to be sort of like the multifamily friendly neighborhood. And then there are ones that in the district abbreviations, they're labeled with an M prefix. Those are all the districts that are mixed use, but today you would be seeing those more as like C3 or, you know, C3 through 8 probably right now. And then we have a couple other districts right now like RC, which is an abbreviation for residential commercial. Well, a lot of stuff is residential commercial now, you know, in the mixed use format. So I think that might be one of the areas that is the mixed use neighborhood commercial, which is basically supposed to be small scale, you know, kind of local services type stores.
And manufactured home community?
Yeah, I mean, that's a use. It's just a use.
Will be included in manufactured home community?
Modulars, mobile homes.
Yeah, like modular homes. Which I
anything
think
not
are,
built on site.
yeah,
would
I mean, I think
Right.
those are pretty sparse, honestly. I'd have to pull up where they are in the use chart. But if you see anything elsewhere in the code that you're kind of wondering like, okay, what does this use mean? Go back to that uses draft chapter, because when it breaks down into like the more specific categories of uses, it will give you a definition.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would just control F the document if there's something very
Okay.
specific you're looking for.
RJ, I might be the only old school person here who feels this way, but do we have any, rather than having to click on or go back to as you're going through this, the actual proposed map
Oh,
that you can actually read?
we don't have any
Notes.
printouts of it right now, but I could talk to Public Works and see if they can put something through the large format printer.
Yeah, for me, when I'm looking at all these different zoning districts,
Mm-hmm.
it just would be easier if I could look at more.
For sure. Yeah, I have a giant monitor in my office. That's why.
I don't have a giant monitor.
Most people don't. So that I can split screen it and it's easier that way. Because I was doing that on the laptop for one day and Yeah.
Well, I don't know if
yeah.
anybody else would find it
I
helpful.
would echo
but-
that.
Yeah,
I would
That would be-
appreciate one very much. I mean, I'll come down and get it. If you
Yeah.
could just like.
Yeah.
let me talk to
Email.
Public Works, because I don't know if they, when you're making a large format PDF like that, you have to save it in that large resolution, and I just don't know if we did, we may have. So I'll talk to the consultants.
Yeah, I
if
mean,
we
I
didn't,
don't,
and
I
if
don't know
yes.
what the choices of size. I don't necessarily need
You
a
want the
full,
monster map?
full size, but enough so
Uh,
that I can actually read roads
I
and
think the
things.
Works has a 3x4 paper.
Yeah.
set.
Well,
Let me see what I can do though.
yes,
Yeah.
whatever
I'll let you
you
know.
can do.
And Al, to your question, that manufactured home use, that is only proposed for a conditional use in moderate density neighborhood, which that was that third core residential that I was kind of struggling to come up with the name. So yeah, all the ones that are sort of those core residential where, you know, at most they might have a little corner store somewhere, if even that. That would be in the moderate density. The very low and the low density neighborhoods are still, like, I mean, that's pretty much what you think of as R1 and R2 today. With the addition of, you know, maybe a carriage home or something like that, because those mother-in-law suites are already pretty popular. The moderate density neighborhood are where you're going to see the most in terms of any sort of multifamily like townhomes. And also that neighborhood is going to encompass what I've called the legacy lots. In the past, if you've heard me use that term, it's basically like the lots that were, you know, 65, 70 feet maybe wide. That back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when things were developing, you know, those
It's
older.
like bingo lots.
Yeah, they were composed of the bingo lots that you could win downtown once upon a time. So the goal of that particular district is really just to deal with what the existing condition is, because the last time we did the structure in the 70s, all of those older neighborhoods got thrown into R2, sometimes even R1, which I don't understand how that happened. But and the R2 setbacks are based on an assumed 90-foot lot width minimum. So, you know, people that live in sort of those legacy neighborhoods, you can't do anything on your lot without a variance, really. So that's the main goal of that district, but you are going to see a little bit more multifamily uses in that. So anything that is core residential has the R prefix. I misspoke earlier. We actually changed the. Oh, no, we didn't. My draft has the old letters. Okay, so with the mixed use districts, they do have that M prefix. I think one is MN. One's MC that's for corridor neighborhoods. So like you would think of between Pine Creek Shopping Center and CCAC, sort of where, you know, Perry Highway opens up into that more car oriented stretch. That's an example of a corridor neighborhood. And then I think we called urban neighborhood MU in the new structure. And that's more like Wexford Flats, that type of thing is what you'd see. The other couple in a different category are sort of those special use and focus districts. One is just called special district. That's basically for campus properties, so hospital, school. You know, the Sisters of Divine Providence is another kind of campus-like property. And then preservation, which is basically going to be your parks and town-owned property district. The one that I didn't mention was Town Center. I honestly don't remember how we named it. It might have just been TC in the new structure, but that's going to be the most dense, you know, transit-oriented development around the park and ride. That's what's being proposed right now. Anyway, for redevelopment of sort of the, you know, the old cinema site. Can't get much more impervious surface down there, so all you can do is make it better, even if it gets redeveloped into something that's a little more dense. So that's sort of the current district scheme being proposed, if that helps.
Right.
To kind of follow up on Al's question, you just threw out certain, you said a corridor neighborhood and all these, and then you said like the area between so-and-so and so-and-so along Perry Highway. How do we know that? You know, that's what it is, but how do we know that as we read through these?
So the map that Shelley was referencing in.
Map will help.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the memo from the consultants, there's like a little hot link in there in the PDF. If for some reason you can't access it, let me know. I'll send it out again. But yeah, so that's all, you know, marked and color coded and everything, but those are just the areas that off the top of my head, I remember,
Okay.
you know.
All right.
RJ, I don't want to belabor this, but just give me an example of a low density versus a moderate density neighborhood.
Yeah, so low density is going to be, you know, a lot of what is R2 today. That's pretty much your standard 90-foot wide lot that gets developed with new construction nowadays.
So with
Like
the
a housing
neighborhood you
plan.
live in, Dan and
Yeah.
I, is that a low density?
I would-
You're a legacy neighborhood, I think. What, well, let me,
I don't know.
let me see.
It's only about 85 feet wide, I think.
Ooh, well, then you would, because that's smaller than, oh, great, my GIS is not
Definitely
gonna
not
load.
an 80.
Yeah, if you're in 80 feet, it may be that you still get zoned in low density because it doesn't deviate quite that much, but I mean, anything that's under 90 feet would have been done prior to when our current R2 code was in place. So those are the neighborhoods that we targeted to put in that low density. Very low density is gonna be like almost your estate lots. In our current code, they're only 100 feet wide, so you know, just a 10-foot difference, not really a meaningful difference, honestly, nowadays. So some areas that are zoned R1 right now
So
are
is the-
smaller than those lots would be anyway.
is it determined by the width of the lot?
Um,
I mean, you said under 90 is a low density, so is moderate like 90 to 120? I mean, what,
under 90 would most likely end up in the moderate density neighborhood. It's not really 1-to-1, but that was kind of our baseline for how we started looking at the different neighborhoods. I wish I could show you, but my cloud map is not loading all of my layers right now, unfortunately. But let me see if maybe I can pull something else up.
The map makes it really a whole lot clearer, because some of
Yeah.
what is currently R1, like the area I live in off Perrymont is currently an R1. It's now being put into the, not the very low density, but the low density, because a lot of the lots that are off of Perrymont, the smaller lots on East Sandal and Louise and whatever, are smaller than what would be accommodated in the current R1. And to do
Right.
things, you'd need a variance. So
Well, I
the-
think bump that up by one, because it's weird. Our R2 district is also a single family district.
Right.
It's technically allows duplexes, but they're very difficult to build. So I think you might be in R2 right now. And if that whole area is smaller than 90 feet in width commonly, you might end up in moderate density. I'll double check that. You all can double check, you know, with the materials that you have in your packets. But point being, like, Anne, you're right. It's really what is the sort of look and feel of the neighborhood overall. Like if for me, since I sit here looking at our parcel map all day, you know, like I can kind of just eyeball what the shapes look like on that map and go, oh, that's definitely a 70-foot wide lot or something like that. So I sat with the consultants for about an hour and we went through the whole.
and
map
this may not
that was
be
out.
important or not, but what, could it be that you'd have under 90 feet at two different classifications then? And what does that do for?
Maybe, but we tried to avoid that for the most part, because the goal with the moderate density neighborhood, especially for the single family homes that are proposed to be zoned into it, is let's look at really what the existing condition of these lots are and have been for decades, you know? So essentially, let's kind of clean this up and make it right for the people that live there and want to do reasonable things on their property. Because those variances generally get approved. So that sounds like as a community, we're okay with it, you know? So we're more trying to match what is there with that particular district.
Sounds like a map's gonna help.
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's just fair to say that, kind of to your question, Al, is that, yeah, there's definitely gonna be in some districts, things that don't fit there, because obviously we're almost a fully developed town, but I would just say it's the spirit and the nature, the nature of the area that was driving the determination of what existing nature of that was driving the the proposed.
Well, the only thing I would
areas.
think or think about is if that was the case, if you, you know, if you're writing a zoning that has the spirit of the neighborhood and you have certain neighborhoods that look the same, but they're different, they're different zoning, and you can do something in one neighborhood that looks like the same as another neighborhood that you can't do anything, doesn't that raise some issues for not only this body, but just the town?
Well,
in
that's what
general?
we have
Well,
today. We're
you-
trying, that's what we have today. We're
You-
trying to,
So that's somebody from 1976. What they were
Right.
thinking.
we're trying to go from 1976 to 2022 to reflect what has happened since 1976.
No, I mean, I understand that.
Well, what happened
But-
before 1976, honestly, but for some reason we just,
Well, right.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, here's the thing, also, to your question out, yes and no. So I've got up on the screen here, this is the map that should be linked in your memo, but I'm just gonna redistribute the link to you all just in case, because I struggled to open it from the PDF right now. So this is what the consultants have sent out. Disclaimer for anybody watching at home, this is not final, this is just the draft map. But we have a pretty good indication that this is where the consultants are recommending we go. So you see this 3.1 color right here, that's that low density neighborhood? No, that's moderate density, yeah, okay. So 3.2, this is something they're gonna amend to actually match the letters, but I'll have to send them an email about that tomorrow. Anyway, so this 3.2, which is really this sort of pale yellow color, see these shades where I'm moving my cursor around? Those are going to be the low density neighborhoods. You can think of them most analogous to R2 today. These yellow orange, I'm gonna go with macaroni colors. These are the moderate density neighborhoods. And again, if you get a little more granular, you can really see, you know, these lots are kind of a bit wider than these ones over here. And this might even be right above your neighborhood. Let's see.
I think it is.
Yeah, here we are over here.
Yep.
So, you can see again, a lot of these are probably about 60 to 70 feet wide. But then this must have been developed differently. So even though you access it through this neighborhood, Van Buren has lots that are often 90 to 100 feet wide. So we're recommending that it be in, you know, sort of the R2 analogy zone.
Well, and to help you with that, RJ, so right now, if you look at just the frontage on Perrymont, only the frontage on Perrymont where my house is, which is on the corner of Louise, is R1. The properties behind me are R2 because the lots are so much smaller. This is just making it a much more homogeneous mix to try and make it more compatible and easier for property owners to deal with uses on their lots.
Right. And also, at the same time, we have to keep in mind that, you know, and you'll see this in the districts language and graphics, because that's a really graphic heavy section. Some of those lot with minimums are like one might be 65, I think maybe is the moderate density one. In theory, if you wiped out everything on a lot, you know, and somebody wanted to subdivide, they could subdivide to that width. So there may be, I mean, I know for a fact that there are a couple lots that we have in town that are like 50 feet wide, which is really small for, you know, even the more dense neighborhoods in this community. But if you zone to the absolute lowest common denominator in that case, you've now allowed everybody to build that size lot if they get their hands on a piece of property in that district and subdivide it. So it's a balance of
contiguous parcels. right?
exactly. And so it's a balance of what can we live with? Well, we've got a ton of houses that, you know, across these neighborhoods we're zoning into this area very commonly are 65 feet. So you're pretty much doing what's already there. And even though there may be some 50-foot lots in there, that would not necessarily be in keeping with the character of what most of the district is.
Mhm. And I think that's maybe something to keep in mind, because a lot of these houses are aging, they're 50, 60, 70 years old. So kind of invites people, or to buy those contiguous parcels.
Right,
Rip it down, now you have, an apartment building in the middle of a
right.
housing plan,
Right.
right? So,
And so we don't want that, and there are, I think if I go back to the. Multifamily, yeah, actually, when you get into moderate density. You can't even just do a straight out apartment building, that it would have to be. Apartments on top, corner store on the bottom or something like that, or a restaurant or whatever.
as well as like mixed uses. kind of,
Right, right, and that's more in those corridor areas where that was kind of the spirit of what we wanted already, but our dimensional standards didn't really align with what. You need for development of that type of, housing or commercial building, so. Yeah, it's very much a balancing act of how do we allow reasonable use of property that we as a community have decided is okay. Without opening the door for too much, so, yeah.
How, I don't know if we've gotten there yet, but do you know how the code is addressing the fee in lieu of?
We have not gotten there yet. That's gonna be
Okay.
in the Saldo section, but it is a topic that we've already discussed in our staff meetings, so, yeah. We'll definitely bring it up again.
Okay. All right, that's item number 2, which takes no action on our part tonight, I presume.
Yes,
Item number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the September 6th, 2022 minutes. We need a motion to
Well,
approve.
First, I think.
did we
we
have
should
any?
ask them,
Yeah,
see if there's any
Any,
questions.
Do we have any
comments?
questions? And obviously, we've got nobody in this audience. Do we have anybody out? No questions for the minutes? Then it is time for a motion to approve the September 6th, 2022 minutes.
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? They are
Mr.
approved.
Mr. Chairman, may I abstain, please, as I was not at the meeting?
You certainly may. Item number 4 on the agenda is general public comment. I'd be surprised if there is any, but is there anybody online?
No.
just a lawyer.
Okay. Then the last item is adjournment. This is going to go down as fastest meeting ever.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
Aye.
see y'all next month.